My name is Linda Carter. I'm 81 years old, and for most of my life, I believed that love, loyalty, and sacrifice would always return home to you in some form. I was wrong. The night it happened, I remember every creak of the floor, every echo of laughter outside the bathroom door. Every moment I realized I wasn't just being forgotten. I was being punished. It started with an argument, just a small one, over dinner. My son Mark had invited his friends over. Men in their 50s like him, laughing too loud, drinking too much, talking over me like I was part of the wallpaper. One of them, Calvin, spilled red wine on the tablecloth my late husband, Harold, had bought for our 50th anniversary. Gasp. Mark rolled his eyes. "It's just a cloth, Mom." I stood up to clean it. That's when Calvin smirked and said, "You know, old people are so dramatic." They laughed. I didn't. I went to the bathroom to cool off. Just a moment to collect myself, maybe wash my face. I needed air. But when I tried to open the door, it wouldn't budge. The lock twisted but didn't click. I knocked, then banged. "Mark!" No answer. I heard them laughing again, closer this time. Then footsteps approaching. Blick, blick. That sound. I realized they had added a lock. From the outside, panic shot up my spine. I began pounding harder. "Mark, what are you doing? Open this door." Then I heard him. "My son. She's fine in there," he said, laughing with Calvin and another man, Trevor. "Let her sit and think about how annoying she is. I swear, the old bat thinks this is still her house." Then Calvin replied with words that made my knees buckle. "Maybe it won't be hers much longer." Froze. My legs gave way. I slid to the floor. I didn't know what scared me more, that they had trapped me in the bathroom like a child, or that they were planning something that would take everything away from me. I pressed my ear to the door, heart thudding like a war drum, and then I heard something that changed everything. Trevor whispered, "She signs the house over by Friday, or we move on to Plan B." What was Plan B? I never got to hear the answer. Just footsteps, fading. And me. Still trapped behind a door in the house I built with my own 2 hands, wondering how the boy I gave life to could become the man locking me away in silence. But to understand how I ended up trapped in that bathroom, crying into my nightgown, "You need to go back with me." Back before Harold died. Before my son started looking at me like I was a burden. Before the cracks in my family turned into fault lines. Back to when I still had hope. So let me take you to the beginning. I was 23 when I first met Harold Carter. You won't believe what we built together, and how it all crumbled in the hands of the one person I trusted most. Please like, comment, and subscribe if this story has gripped your heart so far. Next chapter is coming, and trust me, you won't believe what my son did when the will was read. Harold was everything a young woman dreamed of in the 1960s. Handsome, hard-working, and soft-spoken. We met at a church fundraiser in a small Georgia town. I was helping set tables. He was there delivering a truckload of donated lumber for a community project. Our eyes met over a tray of apple pies, and he said, "You look like someone who makes a home feel warm." I laughed back then, not knowing how true those words would become. We married a year later and moved into a modest 3-bedroom ranch-style house just outside Macon. It wasn't much, but we built it with sweat and dreams. Harold worked at the sawmill, and I cleaned houses until we could afford our own cleaning company. We raised our son Mark in that very home. His crib beside our bed. His little handprints still etched on the hallway wall we never repainted. Mark was our miracle. After 3 miscarriages and a complicated delivery, the doctors had warned me not to try again. So we poured everything we had into him. Our time, our savings, our hopes. Harold taught him how to fish and ride a bike. I packed his lunches and sat at the foot of his bed every night reading stories even when he outgrew them. We cheered his baseball games. We paid for private tutoring. And when he got accepted into the University of Georgia, Harold cried and said, "That's our boy." But something shifted after Harold passed. It wasn't sudden, not right away. The night Harold died of a stroke, Mark sat with me in the hospital. His eyes were red, his hands trembling. "I'll take care of you now, Mom," he whispered. And for a while he did. He visited every weekend, helped with groceries, fixed the leaky faucet Harold had been meaning to get to. But slowly the calls grew less frequent. The visits came with excuses: work, traffic. The boys are coming over. Then came the suggestion. Maybe you should consider moving in with us. It'd be easier. You won't have to cook or worry about stairs. But I wasn't worried about stairs. I was worried about losing my home. I declined politely. That's when the tone shifted. He began coming by with stacks of papers. "These are just some documents the lawyer needs you to sign," he'd say. When I read through them, they were confusing, full of legal jargon and vague clauses about property transfer and estate management. "I just want to make sure you're protected," Mark would insist. But one night, I overheard him on the phone in the kitchen. He thought I was asleep. "No, she hasn't signed it yet," he said. "But she will. She has no one else." No one else. I wanted to scream. But I stayed silent. I began hiding important documents. Made secret copies of the will Harold had drawn up that clearly left the house in my name until death. I buried the original in my old Bible, between the Book of Psalms and Proverbs. Then came the friends. Calvin, Trevor, and sometimes others whose names I didn't catch. They laughed too loud, stayed too long, and treated my house like a clubhouse. I felt like a stranger in my own home. One night they were drinking in the living room, and I walked in to turn down the TV. Calvin looked at me and said, "You still up, Nana? Thought you'd be in bed by now." "We were just talking business." "Business?" "Yes." Trevor smirked. "Flipping properties. This one could fetch good money with the right upgrades." They were talking about my house like it was already listed on the market. I confronted Mark the next morning. "This is my home, Mark. You don't get to sell it. Your father left it to me." His response broke me. "You're too old to manage a house. And too naive to see what's best. I'm just trying to help you, before you fall and break a hip." That week I noticed the locks were changed. Subtle things were moved. My medication was suddenly hard to find. The thermostat never stayed where I left it. I told myself I was imagining things. Until that day, the day of the bathroom. When I was locked in with nothing but the sound of their muffled voices and cruel laughter. After they left, I banged on the door for hours. No one came. I wet tissues in the sink and pressed them against my eyes, praying Harold could still see me. I imagined him sitting outside that door telling me, "You're stronger than they know." But the worst wasn't being locked in that bathroom. It was the realization that my son, the child I nursed, loved, and lifted, was planning to take everything from me. And I didn't know how far he'd go. That night I made a silent vow. If Mark thought he could trap me, break me, erase me, he hadn't met the other side of Linda Carter. Because while they thought they had all the control, they didn't know about the envelope hidden inside the old vent behind my vanity mirror. The envelope Harold gave me before he died. And its contents, let's just say, it changed everything. Don't miss the next chapter. What was inside the envelope will blow your mind. And it's the key to everything that came next. If this story is moving you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support means more than you know. I waited until the house was quiet again. The silence was so thick, I could hear the hum of the refrigerator from across the hall and the occasional creak of the wooden beams above me. That bathroom felt like a prison, but I had something they didn't know. Had time to think. Time to remember. When Harold was still alive, he always said, "Prepare for the storm before the clouds gather." I never fully understood him until the final months of his life, when he started moving things, changing names on documents, quietly severing certain ties. At the time I thought it was paranoia. But now I saw it for what it was. Plan. 3 weeks before he died, he had asked me to meet him in our bedroom late one night. His breathing had become shallow, and his strength was leaving him fast. Still, he sat upright with a manila envelope in his lap. I remember his hand trembling as he handed it to me. "Don't open it unless you absolutely have to," he said. "If anything ever happens and you don't feel safe, use what's in here. It's all in your name. All of it. And Linda, Protect what's yours. I hadn't opened it. Not until that night. Once I was finally let out of the bathroom, 8 hours later, I faked sleep until everyone went to bed. My body ached, my eyes were swollen, but my spirit was awake for the first time in years. I tiptoed into my old bedroom. I pried off the mirror above the vanity. I reached into the dusty vent behind it and pulled out the thick envelope wrapped in a plastic sheet. Inside were 5 things. A notarized copy of our joint will. The original deed to the house in my name alone. Bank account details I had forgotten existed. A letter from Harold to me. Dated the week before he died. Small aged key with no tag. My hands trembled as I unfolded the letter. It read, "Linda, if you're reading this, it means things have gone wrong in a way I feared but hoped would never happen. Mark has changed. I've seen it in his eyes. Greed is a sickness, and I'm sorry we didn't raise him stronger than it. The house, the money, the rights, they're all yours. This key unlocks the safety deposit box in Savannah. Everything in that box is protected under your name. Don't let them take what we built. Love always. Harold." Savannah. That was 2 hours away. And if what Harold said was true, then I had power they never imagined I had. The next morning, Mark acted as if nothing had happened. He made coffee, offered me toast, didn't mention the bathroom, not once. But his eyes watched me too closely. He was waiting for me to ask about the documents again. Instead, I smiled and said I needed to get my hair done. He nodded. "Want me to drive?" "No," I said. "I need the walk." The moment I was outside, I turned the corner, called a cab from a neighbor's driveway, and made my way to the bus station. I took a Greyhound to Savannah. During the entire ride, I clutched that key in my fist like it was a lifeline. I kept picturing Harold's worn face. His tired smile. How he had loved me without noise but with complete protection. At the bank, I presented my ID and the key. The manager escorted me to a quiet room with a thick metal box. When I opened it, I found a stack of legal documents, 2 USB drives, old photos, and $30,000 in crisp bills, neatly packed in bank envelopes. But the most powerful thing inside that box. Proof. Proof of accounts in Mark's name that had been draining Harold's business before his death. I saw wire transfers, forged withdrawals, even emails between Mark and a loan officer suggesting fraudulent activities. My knees weakened. My son didn't just want the house. He had already stolen from his father while he was dying. I called a lawyer right from that room. Her name was Marianne Holloway, someone Harold had mentioned before. She met me within the hour. Her handshake was firm, her eyes sharp. After reviewing the documents, she looked up and said, "Mrs. Carter, if we play this right, they won't just lose the house. They could lose everything." Still I hesitated. He was still my son. Could I really bring him down? Marianne leaned forward and said gently, "You're not destroying him. You're protecting yourself from someone who already destroyed what you had." That ride back home felt longer than the trip out. I kept replaying Mark's laughter behind the bathroom door, Calvin's voice saying, "Plan B," Trevor's smirk. This wasn't just about property. It was about dignity. And I was done handing mine away. That night I returned home. They hadn't even noticed I was gone. The lights were off. Empty beer cans on the porch. The living room stunk of stale pizza and betrayal. I walked into my room, locked the door, and pulled out a notepad. Tomorrow I'd call the police and begin the legal proceedings. But I didn't get to tomorrow. At 3:18 a.m., I heard footsteps outside my room. Then whispering. Then a hand on the doorknob. It began turning slowly. Don't miss the next chapter. What happened that night nearly shattered every ounce of strength I had left. If this story has gripped you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your voice gives mine more power. The doorknob twisted slowly, almost silently, like someone was trying not to wake me. But I was already wide awake, sitting on the edge of my bed, the manila envelope clutched in my hand like a shield. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. Click. The sound of metal unlocking pierced the silence. Whoever was on the other side had a key. My son. My own son had used a key to come into my bedroom in the middle of the night. The door creaked open an inch. Then another. I could see the outline of his frame, tall and hunched in the dim hallway light. Behind him, I caught a glimpse of Calvin, barefoot and shirtless, whispering something I couldn't hear. Mark stepped in. "Mom," he whispered like some twisted ghost trying to sound gentle. "Are you awake?" I stayed perfectly still, heart pounding. Then Calvin's voice. "Just check if she has the papers. We'll talk in the morning." My skin turned cold. They weren't just checking on me, they were searching for something. I slid the manila envelope under the edge of the mattress and reached for the lamp beside my bed. When I turned it on, the room filled with harsh yellow light. Mark blinked. "Oh, you're up." He tried to smile, but his eyes darted nervously toward the bed. "Didn't mean to scare you. Then why are you in my room at 3 in the morning?" I asked quietly, watching his body stiffen. Calvin took a step into the doorway, but I narrowed my eyes and said, "You too? Or are you just here to loot in shifts?" Mark held up his hands. "Mom, relax. We just heard a noise. Thought maybe you fell or something." "You installed a new lock on my bedroom door," I said. "You never gave me a key. And now you're using yours in the middle of the night." His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "You don't trust me, do you?" I said nothing. His eyes hardened. "You're not well, Mom. You've been confused lately. I think we should get someone to evaluate you." There it was. The beginning of the real plan. They weren't going to wait for me to sign the house over. They were going to declare me incompetent. That was Plan B. I knew it with a terrifying clarity. And they were going to start tonight. I reached under the mattress, pulled out the envelope, and stared at it in my hands. Mark's eyes followed the movement. "What's that?" I didn't answer. I simply said, "Leave my room." His face changed. A flicker of something dark crossed it. A line between his brows deepened. "I'm not going to let you ruin everything," he said under his breath. "Dad didn't leave you this house just to let it rot under your paranoia. You don't know what you're doing." "Oh, but I do," I whispered back. Then, in one swift motion, I stood and walked toward the door. "I'm going to the police first thing in the morning. And you'll get a letter from my lawyer shortly after." "You're not thinking clearly," he snapped. "You're acting like a child." I stepped even closer. "No. I'm finally acting like someone who refuses to be walked over." I slammed the door shut between us and locked it with the deadbolt I'd installed myself just weeks after Harold died. I stayed up all night, afraid to sleep, watching the door, holding that envelope like a loaded weapon. At dawn, I packed my things and left the house with the help of Marianne's assistant. We moved me into a safe, discreet apartment near the courthouse. I left a note behind. "You tried to trap me, but I remembered who I was before I raised you. I will not be erased." But I didn't stop there. With Marianne's help, we filed for an injunction to freeze the property. We launched an investigation into the estate manipulation. And then came the storm. Within 2 weeks, Mark received an official letter demanding he appear in court regarding financial mismanagement and elder abuse. He didn't take it well. Calvin showed up at my apartment a few days later, pounding on the front door. "You think you won," he shouted. "You think this is over." My neighbor called the police before I even had to. They escorted him off the property, but I knew it was only the beginning. What Mark didn't realize was that Harold had left behind more than paperwork. He'd left behind evidence. He'd kept records of every suspicious bank transfer, every loan Mark had taken out against Harold's name. And that USB drive from the deposit box contained video recordings. Mark had installed secret cameras in my home in the months after Harold passed, to spy on me. But in his arrogance, he hadn't noticed Harold had installed his own before that. Now I had them. And the footage would do more than prove his intentions. It would expose everything. Mark was about to learn that the woman he underestimated was not the frail, confused mother he tried to label. I was the widow of Harold Carter, and I still had fight in me. But as we prepared for court, Marianne called with a concern. "Linda, something's off. There's movement on your joint accounts. We need to act fast." Joint accounts. The ones Harold and I had closed. I had no idea what she meant, until we traced the name attached to the new activity. It wasn't Mark. It was Jessica, Mark's ex-wife. And she wasn't working alone. Don't miss the next chapter. The betrayal runs deeper than I ever imagined. If this story is keeping you hooked, please like, comment, and subscribe. The next chapter will leave you breathless. Jessica. I hadn't heard that name in almost 7 years. Not since she packed her bags and stormed out on Mark, screaming that he was just like his father and that she should have stayed with Greg. At the time, I thought she was just angry, emotional, lashing out from a broken marriage. But now, staring at the account statements Marianne sent to my phone, my hands shook. Jessica's name was right there, next to a series of wire transfers, asset reassignments, and something far more chilling. A power of attorney form, digitally signed with my name. So, I never signed it. "I think she's forging your signature," Marianne said grimly. "And it looks like she's working with someone who knows your banking history. Someone close. I didn't even need to guess. Mark, my son, my only child, had partnered with the woman who once called him a monster, to drain what little I had left." I collapsed into the chair in my small apartment, the cold truth settling in my chest like a stone. This wasn't just about the house anymore. This was about everything Harold and I had ever worked for. The cleaning business, our savings, our investments, even the land title we bought for retirement but never used after his stroke. It was all on the table now. And they were feasting. "Don't worry," Marianne assured me. "We're going to freeze all the accounts tied to your social. I've already filed an emergency petition with the probate court." "But what about the forged signature?" "Yes. What if people believe it's real?" She leaned in closer on the video call. "That's the thing, Linda. If we can prove just one signature was forged, we can reopen everything. Even the sale of your husband's old company shares." I barely slept that night. Not out of fear but out of fire. A different kind of fire than I had known. Not the shaking panic of the bathroom. Not the cold ache of betrayal. This fire was red-hot rage. The next morning, I walked into the courthouse like a woman reborn. My back was straight. My clothes were pressed. My hair was pinned up just like Harold used to love it. I saw Mark standing near the lobby with Calvin beside him. His eyes widened the moment he saw me. "Mom," he said, fake concern dripping from his mouth. "What are you doing here? I thought you weren't feeling well." "I'm feeling fine," I replied calmly. "The judge will be too. We're about to have a very productive morning." He blinked, then frowned. That's when Jessica walked in. She looked different, thinner, more polished, hair dyed honey blonde. She didn't even glance my way as she strode into the courtroom like she owned the place. But I noticed something. She was wearing my necklace. Harold had given it to me on our 25th anniversary. A small ruby pendant with our initials engraved on the back. I had lost it a few months ago, thought it had slipped behind a dresser or gone down a drain. But now I knew. They'd been taking from me for longer than I realized. The hearing was short but explosive. Marianne presented the forged documents, highlighted the discrepancies in my signature across different accounts, and then dropped the hammer. Security footage from the bank showing Jessica handing over a form, signing on my behalf, while a man off-camera whispered instructions to her. When the bank rep identified the voice, it was Mark's. Jessica's face fell. Mark's mouth clamped shut. Marianne looked at me and whispered, "That's the sound of leverage." The judge issued a temporary injunction. All accounts frozen. All power of attorney documents invalidated pending a forensic signature review. And a court date scheduled for a full probate hearing. Mark stormed out of the courtroom. Jessica followed, heels clicking like bullets on the tile floor. And me. I stood taller than I had in years. But I knew it wasn't over. Later that evening, I got a call from my old neighbor, Miss Geraldine. "Linda, baby, I hate to call with bad news, but I saw your son's friends loading up a U-Haul from your house. My heart dropped. They're selling your furniture, sugar. I saw that Calvin man carrying out your wedding chest. My knees nearly buckled. I hadn't just lost money. They were erasing me. I called the sheriff's department immediately, but because of the legal gray area, the deputy on the phone said, "Ma'am, until the probate hearing is concluded, technically your son has shared access unless you file a trespassing injunction." Shared access. To my home. To the place where I raised him. Where I kissed Harold goodbye for the last time. The next morning I drove down there myself. And when I turned the corner onto my old street, I felt a tear roll down my cheek. The porch swing Harold built. The flower bed I planted in his memory. Dug up. And sitting in the driveway, smirking like he'd won, was Calvin. He stood in front of the garage, arms crossed, while a younger man pulled my armchair, the one Harold fell asleep in every Sunday, into the back of the truck. "Afternoon, Linda," he said like we were old friends. "What are you doing?" asked my voice low. "Just clearing out a few things. Mark said you wanted to start fresh." I walked past him and entered the house. Everything was gone. Pictures, mugs, book, even the curtains. I stood in the empty living room as the weight of it all crashed down around me. It was like I never existed there. Then something caught my eye. A single photo had been left behind, probably slipped between the cushions. It was Harold, holding baby Mark, smiling wide, his hands strong, his love obvious. I picked it up, pressed it to my chest and whispered, "I'm not done." The next day I filed the injunction. Marianne moved up the court date, and I made one final call, to a local news station. I gave them everything. The abuse, the forged documents, a theft, the bathroom incident. They said, "We want to cover your story, Ms. Carter. We want the world to hear what happened to you." And I let them. Because if the courtroom wasn't going to scare Mark, public shame just might. But before the segment could even air, someone broke into my apartment. They didn't steal anything. They just left a single note on my kitchen counter. "If you don't back off, you'll end up like Harold. Don't miss the next chapter." The truth about Harold's death, the lies my son buried, and the danger I never saw coming will finally be revealed. If you're still with me, please like, comment, and subscribe. What happens next will shake everything. The note trembled in my hand. "If you don't back off, you'll end up like Harold." I read it again and again, hoping my eyes were playing tricks on me. But the handwriting was real. Slanted, rushed, written in ink that smudged as my fingers shook. They had been in my apartment. Not to rob me, but to warn me. I collapsed into the kitchen chair, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear my thoughts. All I could see was Harold's face the night before his stroke. How pale he looked, how tired, how he gripped my hand like he wanted to say something but didn't have the strength. Could it be? Had I spent all these years mourning a death that wasn't as natural as I believed? Called Marianne right away. She was quiet for a few moments, then asked, "Linda, did Harold have any history of heart problems before the stroke?" "No," I said. "He had perfect checkups for years. He just collapsed one night after dinner." "Did they perform an autopsy?" "No," I whispered. "The doctor said it was a standard stroke. He was 79. Everyone accepted it." "Linda," she said, her voice steady, "I think we need to go back to that night." The next morning, I made the trip to the hospital that treated Harold. I hadn't set foot there in years. The lobby still smelled like disinfectant and old coffee. The nurse at the records desk looked confused when I requested my late husband's file, but with Marianne's legal request, they handed it over. I sat in my car reading every page. Doctor's notes, vitals, discharge summaries. Then I saw something odd. On the night he died, Harold's vitals suddenly plummeted 20 minutes after eating dinner. His nurse noted that he complained of dizziness, chest tightness, and a sudden spike in blood pressure. The toxicology screen was clean, but there was no mention of what he ate that night. Just a vague phrase. "Dinner prepared by family." My blood ran cold. Only one person prepared his food that night. Mark. I remembered it now, clear as day. I had gone upstairs early with a migraine. Mark was in the kitchen that night. He insisted on helping Dad with a homemade meal to bond while I rested. When I woke up, Harold was already gone. And now, years later, a note threatens me with the same fate. I couldn't ignore the feeling tightening around my chest. Harold didn't die by accident. I rushed back to Marianne's office and laid everything on the table. Her eyes narrowed as she flipped through the documents. "It's circumstantial," she said, "but combined with the threat note and the property theft, it paints a very dark picture." We filed for a formal investigation into Harold's death. A court order would allow us to exhume the body if necessary, but Marianne warned me, "They'll try to stop us. Especially if they know we're getting close." And they did. 3 days later, as I returned home from the grocery store, I noticed my front door cracked open. I stopped cold. I knew I'd locked it. I slowly entered, my phone in my hand, ready to dial 911. Nothing was missing. But everything had been moved. My photo albums were torn off the shelves and dumped on the floor. My file drawers had been opened. My bedroom closet was wide open. They were searching for something. They were desperate. Called the police. But just like before, there wasn't enough evidence for an arrest. Just another report. Just another warning. Just another violation. I sat on the floor that night, crying into my knees. Not because I was afraid, but because I realized something that broke me all over again. My son might have killed his father, for money. And now he might try to kill me too. I had given him life. And he had filled mine with fear. But I wasn't going to run. Well, not this time. The news story aired that same night. Channel 7 ran the full segment. Photos of me and Harold, footage from the courthouse, and the emotional interview I gave in my tiny living room, tears streaking down my face as I said, "I raised my son with love, but what he gave me back was betrayal." The next morning everything exploded. Strangers came knocking with support. Women my age hugging me. A man whose mother had gone through something similar. Messages from viewers flooded the station. But the most shocking reaction. Jessica called me. "I want to talk," she said. "I can't live with this anymore." She agreed to meet in public, a quiet park bench by the lake. When she arrived, she looked different. Not done up. No jewelry. Hair tied back. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in weeks. "I didn't know at first," she said. "About Harold. About the signatures. Mark said you gave everything willingly. He said you were losing your mind." She paused, tears forming. I believed him. I was stupid. But I swear I didn't know until after. And by then, I was in too deep. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because you're not the only one he hurt," she said. Then she pulled something from her purse. A voice recording device. She handed it to me. "Press play." I did. And what I heard was Mark talking to Calvin. "If she doesn't sign by next week, we move forward. She ends up like the old man. Just slower this time. Something in her food. Something that won't show." My throat closed. Jessica looked away. "He used me. Like he used everyone." I asked her why she recorded him. She whispered, "Because I thought if he ever turned on me, I'd need something to survive." We sat in silence. The wind blew gently across the lake, but in my heart a storm was building. Now I had evidence. Now I had motive. And now, I had a witness. Mark's world was about to come crashing down. But just when I thought I had all the pieces, Marianne called again. "Linda," she said, her voice tight. "We got access to Mark's deleted emails through a subpoena. And," I asked, holding my breath, "there's something else. Someone else involved. Someone even closer than Jessica." I didn't understand. Until she said the name. And when she did, I dropped the phone. Because it was the last person I ever imagined. Don't miss the next chapter. The final betrayal is deeper than blood. If this story has shaken you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Everything is about to change. I picked the phone off the floor with trembling fingers, Marianne's voice still echoing in my ears. It's Susan. Susan. My best friend of 38 years. My neighbor. My confidant. The woman who held my hand during Harold's funeral. Who brought me soup when I had the flu. Who cried with me when Mark started pulling away. Susan was part of it. I struggled to breathe. No, I whispered. No, Marianne, you must be mistaken. But she wasn't. We cross-checked the email logs. There are messages from Mark's address to someone listed as SS, discussing the will, the property, and how to isolate you. The full name listed in the account recovery is Susan Stafford. I dropped into the armchair and stared into space. My entire body went cold. Susan had a spare key to my house. She always said it was just in case. And now I remembered. She was the one who convinced me not to pursue an autopsy after Harold died. She said, "Let the man rest, Linda. Don't stir up shadows." But it wasn't shadows she was hiding. It was murder. That night I couldn't sleep. My apartment felt too quiet. Every sound was a threat. Every silence a betrayal. I sat up staring at the wall, replaying every conversation I ever had with Susan. She was always so gentle, so soft-spoken. She made it easy to lean on her. But now I saw it, how she subtly encouraged me to let Mark handle things. How she planted little seeds of doubt. Don't overthink, Linda. Maybe you are forgetting things. Just trust your son. She wasn't supporting me. She was gaslighting me. I called Marianne the next morning. "We're pressing charges," I said. "I want everyone involved exposed. I don't care how close they once were." And Marianne was ready. The police obtained a warrant to seize Susan's laptop. Inside they found damning communications. Emails where she advised Mark on how to slowly drain my accounts without triggering alerts, how to isolate me legally, how to make me appear senile. It was all there. Her betrayal was sharper than Mark's. 'Cause she saw me cry. She hugged me while helping destroy me. When she was arrested, she sobbed in front of her house, playing innocent. But the local news had already gotten wind of the story. The footage of her being led away in cuffs played on the evening broadcast, next to photos of me and Harold, smiling on our front porch. The tide had turned. And Mark, he wasn't hiding anymore. He was angry. He left me a voicemail that I will never forget. "You've ruined everything. You could have just given it up quietly, Mom. Now it's war." It already was. Only now I wasn't fighting alone. Jessica had turned witness. Marianne had gathered enough evidence to tie Mark to multiple counts of fraud, attempted financial abuse, and possible involvement in Harold's death. The court hearing was moved up. Security was assigned to my apartment after the break-in and the threat. But I wasn't hiding anymore. I walked into that courtroom with my back straight, my head high, and Harold's letter in my pocket. Mark sat at the defendant's table, pale and fidgeting. Calvin was nowhere to be found. Jessica sat in the gallery behind me, quiet but present. The judge's voice echoed through the chamber. "Linda Carter, you are here today seeking full restitution of property and financial assets, as well as criminal investigation into the suspicious death of your husband. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said. And for the next 4 hours, Marianne laid it all out. The forged documents, the stolen money, the voice recordings, the toxicology inconsistencies, and most damning of all, the emails between Mark and Susan planning my incompetency. When they played the audio of Mark's voice, "She ends up like the old man, just slower this time," the entire courtroom went silent. Mark's lawyer tried to object, claimed the tape was manipulated, claimed I was senile, claimed I was confused. But then Jessica stood up. She said, "He told me to poison her, in small doses, so she'd lose her mind and the court would hand him the house." The judge looked at her, then at me, then at Mark. His eyes were unreadable. "Mr. Carter, this court will be filing a motion for criminal prosecution in addition to the current civil proceedings. You are hereby restricted from any access to the properties or accounts in question. Bailiffs will escort you from the building. Mark stood up furious. You can't do this. I'm her son. I've earned that house. She would have died anyway. He looked straight at me. I gave up my life for you. No, I said, standing slowly, voice trembling but clear. I gave my life for you. And all you did was take. As they handcuffed him, he turned to Jessica. You lying witch. But the bailiff shoved him forward. The room was still. Marianne touched my hand. You did it, she whispered. You've won. But I didn't feel victorious. Not yet. Because as I sat back down, I thought about the last time Harold smiled. The way he used to say, family isn't who you raise, it's who rises with you. Mark didn't rise with me. He rose against me. And now I was left to pick up the pieces. The judge set a final hearing to restore full ownership of the estate to me, and initiate a full investigation into Harold's death. But before I left the courtroom, a detective handed me a sealed evidence bag. Inside was a tiny brown bottle, with no label, and a faint, bitter smell. This was found in your kitchen drain during the forensic sweep, he said. We believe it may have been used to dose your food. We'll let you know after it's tested. I stared at the bottle in horror. They had already started poisoning me. And I never knew. Don't miss the next chapter. What the toxicology report revealed shocked even the police. And what Mark left behind in a hidden email account would bring a secret to light that no one was ready for. If this story has touched you, please like, comment, and subscribe. We're almost at the end. The toxicology report arrived 3 days later. I was sitting in Marianne's office trying to sip tea, but my hands trembled too much. When the detective walked in with a file in hand and a look on his face that made the room go cold, I already knew I wouldn't be able to finish that tea. He sat down, opened the folder, and spoke calmly. We tested the contents of the brown bottle found in your drain. I nodded, barely breathing. It contained a compound called scopolamine. I blinked. What's that? Marianne leaned forward sharply. That's a drug used to induce confusion, disorientation, even memory loss. In large doses, it can paralyze or even kill. The detective continued. It's known in some places as devil's breath, odorless, tasteless, causes hallucinations and blackouts, often used in criminal cases of manipulation, in elderly victims. Even a small amount could look like dementia. My throat closed. Are you saying? I swallowed. They were drugging me to make me look insane. He nodded. Yes, ma'am. And the levels we believe were introduced over time could have caused a stroke in someone with high blood pressure. Like your husband. My stomach dropped. The room spun. Harold. He didn't die peacefully. He was taken. And so nearly was I. I couldn't speak. My eyes filled, and all I could hear was the soft whisper of his voice the night before he died, telling me he loved me, that he'd always protect me. And somehow, even in death, he did. Because without that envelope he left me. Be dead too. Marianne stood and rubbed my back gently. You're safe now. But there's more, Linda. I turned to her. The police recovered an encrypted email account from Mark's old laptop, hidden in a recovery folder. He thought it was wiped, but the tech team retrieved fragments. She pulled out a printed document and handed it to me. It was a draft letter, dated 2 months before Harold's death, addressed to a private offshore law firm in Belize. And it read, I am requesting full documentation to transfer my mother's estate into my name via accelerated guardianship. Once the doctor signs off, we'll proceed with the medical order. Susan will ensure she's monitored. I'll need everything sealed before we initiate the final dose. I felt like I was drowning in my own blood. This had been planned for months. Not just a theft. Not just a betrayal. An execution. They wanted me legally incompetent, medically silenced, and buried before I even realized I was under attack. I'm going to testify at the criminal hearing, I said, voice shaking but steady. Marianne nodded. And I'll be right beside you. But just when we thought we had all the evidence, one final twist broke everything open. Jessica called me late one night. Her voice was frantic. I found something. I was clearing out Mark's things from the storage locker he kept. There's a box of documents. A journal. He kept notes, Linda. Like a twisted diary. She brought it over the next day. We sat at my dining table, flipping through pages stained with cigarette burns and scratched out words. Most of it was rage, long rants about how I owed him, and how Harold never saw his potential. But then we found an entry dated a week after Harold's funeral. She's getting stronger. I didn't think she would. Susan says I'm rushing it. But if we don't act soon, she might find Harold's stupid envelope. I checked the mirror again. Nothing yet. I'll try the bedroom vent tomorrow when she's at the market. I stared at the page. My legs gave out. He knew about the envelope. He had been searching for it. If I had been one day later, it would have been gone. And I'd still be locked in that bathroom. Or worse. Jessica reached into the bottom of the box and handed me a flash drive. There's a video on here. I haven't watched it. But it's labeled, Final Proof. I think he was planning to use it to control you somehow. I plugged it into my laptop. The screen lit up. It was footage from my living room. Camera hidden in the chandelier, facing the couch. I was sitting there talking to Susan. But I wasn't myself. I looked foggy. My words slurred. She was feeding me soup. You need to stop worrying, Susan said sweetly. Just sign the papers, Linda. Mark will handle everything. You're tired. You're too tired to fight. I looked at myself and felt a deep, soul-crushing pain. I didn't even remember that conversation. Because I had been drugged. The video continued. Susan pressing a pen into my hand. Mark pacing nearby, muttering, "Come on, come on." Then it cut. They'd deleted the end. But what was left was enough. Enough to prove coercion. Enough to prove drugging. Enough to bury them both in prison for a long, long time. The day of the criminal hearing arrived. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, advocates, even a few neighbors who used to smile politely but never knew what I had endured behind that porch door. I took the stand. I spoke for over an hour. I told them how I raised a boy who once brought me wildflowers and cried when he lost his first tooth, who later turned into a man who tried to murder his own mother for a house. I spoke of Harold's death, of the bathroom door, of the poison in my food, of the friend who sat beside me for 3 decades, waiting for the moment to strike. When I was done, the courtroom was still. Even the judge looked shaken. The prosecutor turned to the jury and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, if this is not the definition of premeditated elder abuse, financial exploitation, and attempted murder, I don't know what is." Took them 4 hours to reach a verdict. Guilty. On all counts. Mark sobbed when the sentence was read. Life in prison with no possibility of parole. Susan wept, begged for mercy, claimed she was manipulated too. The judge gave her 25 years. And Jessica. She cried too, but they were tears of release. Because she finally broke the chain. I walked out of that courtroom to applause. But it wasn't victory I felt. It was survival. Back at my home. Yes, my home. I walked into the now empty living room. No furniture. No curtains. No porch swing. But it was mine. I stood there and whispered into the silence. "Harold, we're safe now." The wind moved through the hallway like a soft reply. But then, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just a single sentence on the card inside. "Your son had one more partner. And he's not finished yet. Don't miss the next chapter. The final shadow reveals itself. And danger returns when I least expect it." If you've made it this far, like, comment and subscribe. The truth isn't done unfolding yet. The envelope was smooth, heavy. The handwriting sharp, like it had been etched with pressure and purpose. "Your son had one more partner. And he's not finished yet." No name. No signature. Just that one line that ripped open every wound I had worked so hard to close. My first thought was, Calvin. He had disappeared the moment Mark was convicted. The authorities couldn't find him. No current address, no employer, no credit trail. He had vanished like smoke after a fire, leaving behind only the stench of destruction. I rushed the letter to Marianne. She read it in silence, her eyes scanning every corner of the paper like it might bleed out another secret if she stared hard enough. "This wasn't typed," she muttered. "This was written by someone who knows how to make you afraid." She handed it off to a forensic handwriting expert, but I already knew what they'd say. The letter was real. The threat was real. And the war wasn't over. 2 days later, someone tried to access my frozen retirement account. From Savannah. The same bank Harold had used. Only this time, the access attempt came from an IP address linked to a man named Jared Hale. A name I didn't recognize. Until Marianne dug deeper. Jared Hale. Mark's college roommate. A name I hadn't heard since Mark was 22 and in trouble for using Harold's credit card without permission. Jared was with him back then. Always smiling. Always quiet. Always watching. According to records, Jared was now the co-founder of a tech security firm. One that specialized in identity transfers and data wiping. In other words, he was the cleaner. Marianne's voice was tight. "He's the one who wiped Mark's laptop. He's the one who scrubbed the emails. And most likely, he's the one who was helping move your assets offshore." It hit me then. This web ran deeper than greed. This was an operation. Mark had built an entire conspiracy around taking me out of the picture. Emotionally, financially, physically. And now, even after being sentenced to life, his final piece on the board was making a move. But I wasn't going to let Jared Hale finish what Mark started. I gave Channel 7 the full update. They ran another story, this time warning the public about tech-based elder fraud. The anchor stared straight into the camera and said my name. "Linda Carter is proof that even the people you trust most can turn on you. But she's also proof that fighting back works." The public response was massive. Dozens of women emailed me. Women like me. Who'd been manipulated, forgotten, taken advantage of. It was like a floodgate opened. And that's when I knew. Had to use my voice. Marianne and I took the case federal. We contacted the FBI. Within a week, they had Jared's name on a fraud investigation list. But that didn't stop the attacks. The next incident happened one morning at the grocery store. I was standing at the dairy fridge when a man brushed past me. Just a little too hard. My purse was gone before I even realized he'd touched me. I filed a report, changed my locks, and sat up all night again, watching shadows under the door. Then came the calls. Blocked numbers. No voices. Just breathing. I felt like I was in a nightmare I couldn't wake from. And the worst part. I had survived my son, my best friend, and the poison. Only to now live like prey. Marianne suggested a security escort. But I refused. I wasn't going to live afraid. Instead, I installed cameras, joined a neighborhood watch group, got a legal firearm, took self-defense classes at the senior center. The fire in me was no longer burning in desperation. It was burning for justice. The FBI finally tracked Jared down in a condo in Fort Lauderdale. But by the time they arrived, he was gone. All that remained in the apartment was a laptop left open. And on the screen, paused video of me, sitting at my dining table, taken through the window. The title of the file was, "Final Phase, the Transfer." They still wanted my name, my assets, my identity. But what they didn't realize is that I had already changed. I wasn't the woman who cried in the bathroom. I wasn't the mother begging for answers. I wasn't the widow clinging to Harold's memory like it was a lifeboat. No, I was the storm. I contacted a federal prosecutor who specialized in cybercrime and elder fraud. With Marianne's help, we submitted everything. The emails, the journal entries, the IP addresses, the photo files, the threats. And then, a breakthrough. One of Jared's former employees came forward anonymously. He provided a copy of a digital ledger. One that listed over 50 elderly names, each with an attached valuation. Next to my name, $2.6 million. I stared at the number, stunned. That's what they thought I was worth. That's what they were willing to destroy me for. I asked Marianne, how is this even legal? She said, it's not. And that's why we're about to bury them all. The final court date was set. This time in a federal courtroom. I testified again. So did the forensic handwriting expert. So did the tech whistleblower. And when the judge asked me if I had anything to say, I stood, held up Harold's letter again and said, my husband once told me, prepare for the storm before the clouds gather. I didn't listen in time. But I survived the storm anyway. And now, I am the thunder. The courtroom erupted in quiet applause. The judge ruled Jared Hale to be held without bail, pending federal charges. But before he was escorted out, he looked at me and smiled. That same eerie smile I remembered from when he and Mark were boys. I stared back and whispered, smile while you can. You'll never see sunlight again. That night I returned to my home. My real home. I walked through each room slowly. I touched the walls Harold built. I sat on the couch I had finally replaced. I placed the ruby necklace, recovered from Susan's jewelry box, on the mantel beside his photo. And I said, we're finally free, Harold. Then I lit a candle. Not in mourning, but in victory. But just as I blew it out, there was a knock on my door. Soft, slow knock. I wasn't expecting anyone. I walked to the peephole and froze. Because standing there under the porch light was a teenage girl, barely 16, with Mark's eyes. Don't miss the next chapter. Who is the girl at the door? And what does she know that could change everything I thought I understood? If this journey has moved you, like, comment and subscribe. You won't want to miss the ending. She stood under the porch light like a ghost. Thin, soaked from the rain, clutching a plastic bag and a crumpled photograph. Her hair was tied up in a messy ponytail, and her sneakers were covered in mud. But what shook me to my core, what made my knees go weak, were her eyes. Mark's eyes. I opened the door slowly, heart thudding like a drumbeat in my ears. Can I help you? I asked, unsure whether to feel fear or something worse. She swallowed hard. Are you Linda Carter? Yes, I said. She held out the photograph with trembling hands. It was an old picture, one I hadn't seen in over a decade. Mark, age 17, standing beside a girl in a graduation gown. Susan. And in her arms, a baby. The teenage girl's lips quivered. I think, I'm your granddaughter. The world blurred. The porch tilted under my feet. I grabbed the doorframe, fighting for breath. My what? I didn't know until 2 weeks ago, she said quickly. I was living in Ohio. My mom, her name was Melanie, she left me at a shelter a few months ago. But before she left, she gave me this picture and said, if anything ever happens to me, find Linda Carter. Melanie, I whispered. I don't know that name. She was Mark's ex-girlfriend, the girl said. Not Jessica. Someone he dated before he met her. I guess she was young. Maybe they kept it a secret. But she said he never knew I existed. Or maybe he didn't want to. She looked down. My name's Lila. Tears welled in her eyes. I don't know why she waited so long. She was sick. She said she was sorry. But she didn't have anywhere else to send me. I stared at her, this child, my blood. Born in the shadows of a cruel man's life. Left behind like a scrap. And now, standing on my porch, shivering, broken, but brave enough to face a stranger in the dark. I stepped aside. Come in. Lila stepped into the warmth of the house, dripping onto the floor. I led her to the couch, grabbed a blanket and wrapped it around her. She clutched it tight like it was the first time anyone had ever offered her comfort. I made tea, I said softly. Would you like some? She nodded. I returned with 2 cups. We sat in silence for a while. Then she spoke again. I read about everything, she said. The trial. The poisoning. The article about what your son did. I know it must sound crazy. But I'm not here for anything. I just needed to know if I had anyone left. Her voice cracked. If I had someone. My hands trembled as I reached for hers. You do, I said. You do now. We talked for hours. She told me about foster homes, about how she always wondered where she came from, about how Melanie cried every time she asked about her dad. And slowly I began to realize. Mark wasn't just a monster to me. He was a storm that rained on everyone around him, even his own daughter. I found this too, Lila said, pulling a folded paper from her bag. It was a letter. A deathbed note from Melanie. I should have told you earlier, but I was afraid. Afraid of what Mark might do. Afraid he'd try to take you. Or worse. But now that he's in prison, maybe you can find her. Her name is Linda. She's not like him. She's better. I know it. Wept. For Melanie. For Lila. For Harold, who never knew he had a granddaughter. And for myself. Because after everything, after betrayal, after courts, after poison and loneliness, I had been given something I never expected. Second chance. That night I laid out the guest bed. I made grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup. And when Lila fell asleep on the couch with a blanket up to her chin, I sat beside her, whispering softly into the night. I won't let anyone hurt you. Ever again. Weeks passed. The court restored every property and asset to my name. Harold's case was officially reopened, and the toxicology findings were declared tampering with intent to murder. Jared Hale was sentenced to 35 years. Susan never made it past her first year in prison. Her heart gave out under stress. And Mark, he tried to appeal, but the court laughed him out of the room. His final letter to me, sent from prison, was short. You win. Congratulations. But you'll die alone anyway. I didn't respond. Because I wasn't alone. Lila and I built a new life. We planted a garden out front. Flowers Harold would have loved. We fixed the porch swing. She went back to school, and I watched her walk across the stage when she graduated. Her cheeks red with joy, my heart swollen with pride. And one evening, under a soft Georgia sunset, she turned to me and said, Grandma, what if you had never opened the door that night? Smiled. I would have missed the only good thing your father ever left behind. She hugged me tight, and in that moment I knew. This wasn't just the end of my story. It was the beginning of hers. A new generation. Not shaped by trauma, but by strength, and love, and survival. Thank you for walking this journey with me. If my story touched your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe. Let this be a reminder to anyone out there. No matter how dark it gets, you are never truly alone. There's always light waiting at the door.